All right, first Project Ascension Hub build video. Let's do this. Hello and welcome back to Project Ascension Hub. My name is Halen, and today I'm going to finally share with you my Locust Ranger build that I started as part of my very first video on this channel. Now, a while back, I put a poll up on YouTube, and a majority of you said that you'd like to see the journey of me making the build, and making a video like this ended up being more difficult for me than expected. So I'm still going to try to make a video like that in the future, but for this video, it's going to be more of a companion video to the build that I will be listing on the in-game architect. For any of my builds going forward in the season, I will be posting them on the architect using Project Ascension Hub at the very beginning. So if you just search that, you can find all of my builds. Today, I'll try to cover this build somewhat chronologically. We'll start with the starting abilities, what skill cards I think you should use, and we'll also go over the different layers of the build and learn the rotation as we go, building upon that. I'll also go over my plans on what I'm looking for in TBC, and finally we'll cover some gearing and other thoughts about the build. This PvE Locust Ranger build has a lot of things going on, but the core rotation isn't too complicated. Yet it's complex enough to keep your attention and, well, to me at least, it's fun to play. Something I already alluded to, and what I like about this build is that it has many layers. So it's viable to play while you are rolling for the optimal talents and skills in the other layers. This build isn't broken or anything, but I think it is plenty viable for raiding up into Mythic and is just easy to play doing your dailies and dungeons. It's mainly a single target build, but it can do good AoE damage. However, it relies on building up stacks and triggering some other talents, so it's not just press one button and deal tons of AoE damage. I think new players can set this up from level 1 on your very first character and have a functioning hunter build that's enjoyable to play, while also having a lot of power spikes to look forward to as you re-roll the rest of the synergies. As for the level 1 starter abilities, I recommend the following: Steady Shot, Auto Shot, Serpent Sting, and Aspect of the Hawk or Hunter's Mark. These ensure that you have a solid base for a hunter build that will perform all by itself and have a lot of synergies with any other talents that you may roll throughout the leveling or reroll process. You can't roll it at level 1, but Locust Shot is the more optimal version of Steady Shot for this build, since it turns our damage type into nature, but for the purposes of this guide, I'm just going to refer to Steady Shot. Wrath is also a choice for level 1, as you'll see it's part of the core rotation. However, it also requires a legendary talent, which you may not have the card for, or you might need to roll it later. So I imagine that you'll come across Wrath during the rerolling process while you look for that talent. That's why I don't put it as a starter ability. If you're an Ascension veteran or plan to grind out this build, you could be greedy with your level 1s or your starter abilities. You no longer always get them at level 1 if you're a brand new player. But you can grab all the rares you can, like Hunter's Mark, Aspect of the Hawk, and even Slice and Dice for the compound speed synergy that you'll see here in a bit. As far as skill cards go, I like to leave as many slots open as possible during the leveling process, activating only 1 or 2 of each ability and talent to provide a chance for the synergy roll system to activate while leveling. I made this character before the Chapter 2 changes, so I slotted in all my cards at level 1, but if I had to do this build again, I would only slot in any of the talents that synergize with Chimera Shot, which there are many and you'll see them in the build and as we go over this, and for abilities I would slot in the Poison ability card. Unfortunately, the Poison ability card doesn't activate, or you don't obtain poisons until level 30, which could be better, but it gives you a lot of chances to see poison related talents, since the synergy system only activates synergies that are abilities to talents or talents to abilities. So that's why I recommend using poisons for the abilities to try to get a lot of the poison talents, which there's a lot that we need, and then using a Chimera Shot related talent, which should increase your chance of getting Chimera Shot since it's a level 60 ability. So we need to get that synergy going as early as possible. And this skill card strategy is just to keep your options open whenever you're max level. Maybe you get lucky and hit some high rarity stuff while leveling. Maybe you get Chimera Shot before 70 or in your first handful of rerolls. And if you're a new player, it also allows you to save some of those card slots for valuable things that you may get from your card packs as you build your collection. However, I don't think it's a good idea to sandbag using card slots for too long if you're struggling to enjoy the build and you do have cards in your collection that would really help out. Okay, now let's start going over what this build does. I'm going to cover this build in layers or packages of synergies. First, we have the core Locust Ranger package and rotation. Let's start with the Locust Ranger talent. Locust Ranger makes it so that when we damage a target with Steady Shot and that target is stung with Serpent Sting, it triggers the Wild Quiver talent, while also increasing Wild Quiver and Wild Locust Swarm damage. Let's see what those do. Wild Quiver shoots an additional shot dealing weapon nature damage, while Wild Locust Swarm comes from the Locust Cascade talent, which says Wild Quiver triggers 10% weapon damage as nature to nearby enemies when hitting a target afflicted by your insect swarm. So unfortunately, this doesn't hit your main target anymore. It used to, but it's still worth having. So with these talents covered, you can see why we want Steady or Locust Shot, Serpent Sting, and Insect Swarm, which we can also stack with Plague Swarm, meaning you could put both of these on the target. Chimera Shot is probably our most important ability for this build. It deals a hefty amount of ranged weapon damage and also triggers an extra effect depending on the stings you have on the target, and it refreshes those stings. The main effect we're interested in here is the 90% of your Serpent Sting damage done instantly, which will end up doing as much or more than Chimera Shot's weapon damage component. When you add these damage sources together, Chimera Shot and Serpent Sting make up a large portion of all damage done. So you want to find ways to fire it more often, and two talents help us do that. Locust Resurgence will reduce the cooldown of Chimera Shot by 3 seconds every time Steady Shot or Toxic Surge, which we'll cover in a bit, deals damage. We only need 2 activations of this talent to get Chimera Shot completely off cooldown, but we can combo this with Wild Wrath to reset Chimera Shot's cooldown with only 1 global cooldown or GCD. As we're firing off Chimera Shots and Steady Shots, we're also building Wild Wrath stacks. And if we cast Wrath with 3 stacks, it will be instant cast, deal more damage, have a higher critical strike chance, and most importantly, it will refresh Insect Swarm and Plague Swarm on the target while resetting the cooldown of Chimera Shot. So, having covered all these pieces, we can now go over the core rotation, and it looks something like this. First, we make sure our damage over time effects, or dots, being Serpent Sting, Insect, and or Plague Swarm are on the target. Then we start with Chimera Shot, go into 2 Steady Shots, and at this point Chimera Shot's off cooldown, so we fire another Chimera Shot, and now we should have 3 stacks of Wild Wrath, so we fire an Instant Wrath, that resets Chimera Shot so we can shoot it again, and then we begin the process all over again. Chimera Shot, into 2 Steady Shots, Chimera, Wrath, Chimera, and so on and so forth. Thanks to Chimera Shot and Wild Wrath, our dots are refreshed, and we only have to recast it if we switch to a new target. And this is not the whole rotation. We're going to go over the other layers and start adding to it, but this is the core rotation, and it's only going to change slightly. But now we're going to get into the toxic side of this build. In Ascension, we can apply instant poison to ranged weapons. With the Toxic Surge talent, we can also apply deadly poison with the toxic ammo buff that we get after casting Scorpion Sting or Rapid Fire. Don't worry, we'll cover that part about Viper Sting in just a minute. As we deal damage with instant and deadly poisons, we're also triggering Toxic Strikes, which boosts our Chimera Shot damage, and Venom Coated Blade, which makes our Chimera Shot boost our instant poison damage. So we have a nice little cycle going on there. When we consume Toxic Strike stacks, we can also trigger Blood Venom, which poisons the enemy and does even more nature damage. So with these talents, we get a lot of extra damage while changing almost nothing about our rotation. But let's get back to that Toxic Surge talent. Once we've gotten Deadly Poison up to 5 stacks on the target, we can cast Viper Sting to consume all the stacks, usually dealing the most damage of any one ability in the build. And the only change we make to our rotation is casting Rapid Fire or Scorpid Sting to enable Toxic Ammo. And whenever we would cast a Steady Shot to reduce the cooldown of Chimera Shot, we would instead press Viper Sting, and we still get the cooldown reduction from Locust Resurgence, so we can continue the normal rotation. One tip about this rotation, I found weaving instant casts right after Steady Shots can smooth out everything with the GCD and have some sort of like input buffering effect. There's times where there's still just a little bit of cooldown left on Chimera Shot, so there's a little bit of room to cast some other abilities in between your Steady or Viper and Chimera Shot. The best options for this are Stone Shard or Kill Shot. The reason why we're interested in Stone Shard here is its combo with Booming Echoes, and Stone Shard also has a decreased global cooldown. So we can quickly cast a Stone Shard and go right into our Chimera Shot, but we'll also get the boost to nature damage from Booming Echoes, in addition to just some extra damage from Stone Shard. In order for Kill Shot to be viable, we also need something like the Spot Weakness combo. We also have this new Ice Crown Double Tap talent, which we'll talk about later when we get into the TBC editions, but for now, the Kill Shot Spot Weakness combo is what we're looking for. And even though it doesn't say it in the tooltip explicitly, Kill Shot does have a reduced GCD, so it makes it a good option to quickly fire off in between your Steady Shot and Chimera Shot. And that's the majority of what makes the build work. And I would say these are the core pieces that you'll see on the Architect build. But there's still some other things that can give us some extra damage, these other packages or layers. The first one I want to talk about is the Compound Speed and Power. Compound Speed makes it so that Slice and Dice also increases our ranged attack speed, and Compound Power allows us to gain combo points from our Steady Shot so we can cast Slice and Dice. But there are also some other talents to get combo points that you could pick up if you don't get this one. We can also refresh Slice and Dice with Compound Shot and the talent Cut to the Chase, so we can get some extra damage for the time spent pressing another button, which triggers a global cooldown, as opposed to just pressing the button Slice and Dice. Okay, now let's talk about some more free damage and next level combos. We have Expunge and Burst Shot as the best sources of free damage in this build. Burst Shot will trigger often since we're constantly dealing damage with the Chimera Shot, Serpent Sting, and possibly Kill Shot, usually accounting for about 4 to 5% of our damage. Although the tooltip isn't clear, Expunge does deal both the Cobra Venom Dot and Expunge damage to your main target, dealing another 4 to 5% of our overall damage. But in an AoE situation, Expunge can easily be in your top 3 damage sources. This was one of those talents that I was talking about to do respectful AoE damage. Now, this next combo is a really cool one, and I didn't even think about it until my friend Smilo shared his Locust Ranger build with me, which a majority of what you see here is all inspired from the build that he gave me. And that combo is Kingsbane and Forbidden Technique. You could say that this is the forbidden technology of this build. Okay, so Kingsbane is a synergistic poison ability that deals loads of damage, but it's melee. However, it does have a 1-minute cooldown, and there's something else that is also 1-minute cooldown and can teleport us in and out of melee range, being Forbidden Technique. Having tested this, Kingsbane and the passive effect that it happens after you hit with Kingsbane is definitely worth the time spent to teleport up, hit the target, and teleport back. Actually, at the time of recording, I actually haven't gotten Forbidden Technique yet, but there's been plenty of situations where you have to go into melee range, and anytime that's the case, whether it's pre-pull on the boss or something like that, just cast Kingsbane and then walk away, or maybe you have disengage or something like that. As for the rest of the talents, I think they speak for themselves, so I'm not really going to go over them in this video. However, I will mark them appropriately on the Architect as optimal or just empowering to make sure that you don't miss anything that could be useful while you're rolling the build. Now let's talk about some potential additions for the Burning Crusade. With Chapter 3, we got some new stuff, and we also just have more talents and ability essence to use. I think the rotation is about as complex as I would want it. So far, every button we press either deals more damage or allows us to deal more damage with other abilities. So anything we add to this build will need to do the same thing or be worth the GCD if we cast another ability. One of the first things that caught my eye from the mega update content was the Frost Archer package. Let's first take a look at Tundra Tracker and Ice Crown Double Tap. We can easily stack Tundra Tracker and get the Ice Crown Double Tap buff, which can make our kill shot hit even harder and have a decreased cooldown. So that means it's available for the next time that we proc it, or maybe we can make use of surplus spot weakness procs if we still have that talent. Also, if it works the way I'm expecting, the second hit from Ice Crown Double Tap that causes frost damage should also trigger Cold Strike Marksmanship, making our hunter shots deal more damage as well. Essentially, this would give us 25% extra Chimera shot damage while also getting incidental extra damage from our kill shots. And that's if we ideally weave in kill shots following the second steady shot or Viper Sting going into the Chimera Wrath Chimera combo. As for the Stalker of the Frozen Wastes, I think this will be a good addition for dungeon and AoE situations, but we'll have to see if it's worth the GCD to cast Frozen Orb on a single target if we don't also have a lot of supporting frost damage talents. And that's also why I don't think we'd take Frozen Munitions, as it really doesn't do anything for the Locust Ranger core. And casting any of those abilities, again, we use a GCD to do it, and it's probably not going to be worth the damage as opposed to casting any of our other rotation abilities. Oh, and we can't ignore the Steady Shot buff from Frozen Wastes. That will probably make casting Frozen Orb worthwhile, as we can make up for that GCD with increased cast speed and of course the extra damage. And the cast speed really helps us weave in all the other Stone Shards, Scorpid Stings, and kill shots that we need to keep the other synergies going and boost our main damage dealers. However, it is possible that it's a better idea just to use the talent essence on more talents that empower hunter shots and other damage. There are some that would not fit in the build at level 60, but they would at level 70. I will be adding these to the build to look for as I keep rolling in TBC, and if one of them turns out to be really good, then I'll mark it as optimal or even core maybe. And you could always check back in the build to see an update on that. And once I get this build to a level 70 final state, I'll be sure to put out another video. All right, now let's talk about the gear. I've been playing this as agility main stat, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise. And I've also been prioritizing agility on gear. Now, if you're new to Ascension, that last part there may sound a little confusing. Like, well, you said that you use agility main stat, so why wouldn't you prioritize agility on gear? Well, I should specify I prioritized agility and attack power on gear. But in Ascension, there's a talent called Mental Quickness, and if you are agility or strength main stat, it can increase your spell damage by up to 75% of your spell power. However, for the Locust Ranger, a lot of our damage is percent weapon damage, range attacks, and hunter abilities. Oh, and also poisons. All of which have really funky or unclear scaling with spell power in Ascension. In vanilla, when I tested this at 60, attack power was the winner, probably due to the sheer amount of attack power I could get from the set bonuses and gear at the time. Even still, I do have 5 of 5 mental quickness rolled in the build, and TBC brings us new gear sets and bonuses, so I'm going to test this again and report what I find in the next version of the build. But for now, I'm still saying attack power. For your ranged weapons, since our core abilities scale off percent ranged weapon damage, we want the highest total damage possible on a weapon, which is usually going to be the slowest firing weapon you can find, like crossbows. For your melee weapons, I'm using daggers for the Kingsbane combo since it requires daggers. We also benefit from the agility passive for one-handers, so we can get through our rotation that much faster. And we can also do the rare and epic versions of the same high-risk enchant when we dual wield, giving us a lot of stats. All right, and that's it. The Locust Ranger build video. Sorry it took so long, but hopefully it was done in a way that's easy to understand, accessible for new players. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, put them down below. Let me know what else you want to see in build videos or any builds that you actually want to see. I can't promise that I'll make them because I'm the kind of person that I play the way that I enjoy. I don't pick builds based off of them being meta or doing the most damage. I like to do enough for whatever content that I'm playing, and I want to enjoy it. And that's really my biggest advice for anyone looking for a build. Thanks again for tuning in. My name is Halen, and I'll see you next time on the Project Ascension Hub.